my spooky friends. This is John, your host for Dairyland Frights. And I just wanted to ask you if you could please help support my podcast here. I am now on Patreon. And if you could give $1, $3, everything helps so I can buy better equipment, be able to afford, maybe some studio time or get some additional people to help out with research. And I know you really don't have to do anything, but I truly appreciate it, especially, running this podcast all by myself can be a challenge some days, but I do love it. And I do appreciate all your support. And again, I say thank you, my spooky friends. I truly appreciate it. Hello, spooky friends. I'm John, your host, and welcome to another episode of Dairyland Frights, the paranormal podcast that covers everything spooky, creepy, and mysterious in the Midwest. And the great guests continue. I am so blessed to have on my podcast today Dr. Randy Overbeck. Welcome, Dr. Overbeck.
I am delighted to be here. Glad to be sharing a few stories with your listeners.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate, like I said, a man of your stature to be on my little podcast. So here we go. Let's learn a little bit about Randy or Dr. Overbeck. Since retiring from education, Dr. Overbeck has used his 4 decades of experience as a teacher and a school leader to create captivating tales of suspense, heroism, and mystery, all set in the arena of schools. His books have earned national awards, including the Gold Award from Literary Titan, Best Book Award from, help me with this, Chancellor Books and Reviews. Is that correct?
Yeah, Chant LeClaire. Yeah.
Chant LeClaire. Okay. Yeah. Thriller of the Year from readersfavorite.com and Mystery of the Year from readersviews.com. His most recent series, The Haunted Shores Mysteries, have become Amazon and Barnes & Noble's bestsellers. The Fall of the Wild Rose Press will release his newest work, an atmospheric amateur sleuth mystery, Cruel Lessons, the first installment in his new series, Lessons in Peril. He also, I don't know how you have time for this, Randy. He also is the host of his own podcast, Great Stories, about great storytellers, which reveals the unusual backstories of famous authors, directors, and poets. When he is not podcasting or writing his next blockbuster, you can find him speaking to audiences across the country, sharing his multimedia presentations, things that will still go bump in the night, a few favorite haunts, and everything you wanted to know about publishing. So you can connect with Randy via his email, which I will put on my episode notes here in the podcast, as well as share with it. But you can read them at Randy Overbeck, at author Randy Overbeck. And then he is also on Twitter at Overbeck Randy, Instagram at Randy Overbeck, or Facebook at author Randy Overbeck. And again, I will put this all out on my notes in the episode once we release it. But I want to do some fun facts here, Randy. This is crazy because I only have 2 kids. Randy comes from a considerably large family. He is one of 7 sons, and believe it or not, he's the middle son, which, okay. His nieces and nephews could staff several football or soccer teams, and the numbers of his grandnieces and grandnephews are growing. So the Overbeck family is spread over several states, but family members have managed to stay in close contact. His 6 brothers, his oldest brother, Bob, deceased, take a trip together every 6 months to hang out and connect. Family obviously is quite important to you, Dr. Overbeck, Randy. So, wow, that's huge. Anything you want to mention about the family? I mean, that's unbelievable.
For us, it doesn't seem unusual, but I have learned in sharing our experiences that it is very unusual, that not a lot of people whether they come from a very large family or from a not so large family, have made the efforts our family has done to stay close. I mean, this effort goes back probably 40 years from when when I had a young family and um, my mom was still alive and stuff. We would every other year make an effort to vacation together. We often would have 50 to 60 people at a resort location, first state parks, and eventually like Dollywood and Myrtle Beach, those kind of places. And we did that for 26 years.
Wow.
So yes, family has always been important, and especially since in this world, I think this is true of almost everybody's family. Family's always scattered across everywhere.
Yeah.
Even my own immediate family, I only have 3 children, but only one is close by. I live in Ohio. There's one that lives close to me. Another son and family are in outside of Atlanta. Another son and family are outside of Orlando. So
Wow.
it's makes it harder to stay connected, but we work really pretty hard at it.
Yeah. You're my hero. All I have is 2 kids, 2 cats, a dog, and a wife, and I struggle every day. So
Well, it's part of our DNA. So once that becomes really important, and I'm very fortunate. My brothers and I are very different. We have different political philosophies.
mm,
I'm the only teacher in the group. The others are all businessmen of different kind.
yeah.
But we seem to find a way to kind of hang out and have a good time together. And most important of all, we're there when we need us. When one of the group is in trouble or needs some help or needs somebody to respond to, we're there. And you are correct. That is very important to me and to the rest of my family.
Yeah. And so I don't know how you get any sleep at night, Randy. You're a multi-award winning author. You host a podcast, obviously about the family I just mentioned. And on top of it, you're always looking to help people with literacy, which I think is huge. I didn't even get into that because I got tired just reading all your accolades. Is that something? Do you want to bring out on my podcast too? Anything else
Well,
about?
I mean,
Yeah, go ahead.
everybody has to start somewhere. So I am always I'm always working to mentor other writers and help other writers get a leg up. Very often, writers will ask me, "Well, how do I get started? What do I do?"
Mhm.
So and my perspective is, somebody helped me when I was there, and I'm more than happy to provide help. I belong to a writers group, and I help other writers in the group, and they help me. It's a reciprocal arrangement.
Yeah,
It's not one way thing. And of course, I'm a very firm believer in writing conferences and stuff. So yeah, I'm happy to, if you have questions you think some prospective writers might be interested in, I'm happy to share whatever I can, what I've learned. There's a lot I don't know. I will say that right up front.
you're right.
And
Yeah,
I've had successes and I've also had failures. So, I've kind of been there, done that.
right, right. And that's the way you learn, right? That's it's the only way
It
you
is.
learn by making mistakes or have being challenged. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So let's get right into the questions because I'm sure my audience, obviously this is a paranormal podcast, but there are authors out there, people who want to get into writing, especially maybe paranormal stories or maybe haunted stories or tell their life stories. Because I have a lot of guests on who have had some crazy paranormal experiences, have lived in haunted houses, have faced very challenges of growing up dealing with that. And so who knows, maybe somebody wants to write here. So I guess my first question is, Randy, did you always have the desire to be an author?
Yes, I from when I was very young, I've always been a writer, not an author, but always been a writer. And I'll be honest, when I was in high school, I even had dreams of writing the great American novel. But I'm not ashamed to say that the calling to serve kids came, and I answered that calling. I'm not at all I'm not all sad I did that, and it was a really great way to dedicate 40 years of my life to do that. But that doesn't mean during all that time that I left, I left behind the desire to write. Fortunately, in most of the positions that I served, writing was a big portion of that job.
Mhm.
I of those 40 years, 28 of those years I ran school districts. So I was superintendent or assistant superintendent of 4 different districts.
Yeah.
And in that job, a huge portion is writing. I would guess that maybe 30% of my time was spent writing. The writing is really varied. It's not what your listeners are thinking about when they're
Mhm.
talking about writing a book. It's agendas and memos and recommendations and news articles, and I mean the list just goes on and on and on. But it did help me continually sharpen my writing skills.
What?
It helped me
Yeah.
learn how do I adapt my language for the audience, because I'm writing for an audience of voters, for example, for a school levy, or
Yeah.
parents for a newsletter, or staff members for memos and stuff. So it helped in that sense. It's certainly, I'm not telling stories like you do when you're writing fiction, but it helped that. And when I finally, towards the end of my career, started to get some time to be able to do some actual writing, I simply used some of those same skills to put on paper stories that I had kind of bouncing around in my head. And that's the best
So
explanation.
so tell me about what interests you in writing a story. Like, there's obviously you have a lot of ideas, but where do you say, like, you know what, I'm going to start and I'm going to write this story and see where it goes? What, how do you go about doing that?
Well, I recognize that trying to write a significant story, a novel, can appear very daunting. It just goes, oh my God, how could I ever do that?
Right.
But the nature of the job that I left was that I often had to tackle rather large tasks. I'm also a doctorate, so I had to write a dissertation, which people don't know is 100 pages of research. So,
Wow.
I mean, I had a lot of experience in segmenting a task into, okay, well, let's do this first and that first. So, in terms of how did I manage to get from what was in my head onto the paper, the basic tools were already there. And most of my, I would say that most of my approach is mostly in the middle between pantsers and plotters. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but a plotter is a person who, in order to write the book, sits down and writes an outline, figures out, creates the characters, creates some kind of database to be able to kind of flesh out where am I going to go. And a pantser just kind of sits down and goes, okay, go, start writing. I'm in the middle of that. About half of it is pantser that just springs out of my head, and the other half is, well, how do I get this organized and put all these pieces together? And that works for me. It's a different approach for different people. I have authors that I greatly admire who are bestseller authors who are completely pantsers. They don't ever organize anything. They just start writing and write. And then I have other authors that I love that when I've talked with them, they'll tell me they don't ever write anything down that they haven't organized first. So it works both ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember the first story you ever wrote and was kind of like, hey, I think I can do this. I think I can do this for a living.
This was clearly not the first story because I wrote a lot as I was 5 and 8 and 12. But the one that I remember writing that I thought, well, this could be a short story that other people would like was actually in high school.
Oh, okay.
And I remember some of the things that clicked in my head when I was writing it. It was about somebody being thrown in a jail cell and for something they didn't do and stuff. I don't remember a whole lot of details beyond that. But that was when that hit. I'm going, I think I could do this. I think this is something that I might have the skill set to be able to pull off.
Wow. See, I think
and
that's
there's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great because it's just, again, everybody starts somewhere, right? Even Stephen
Right.
King started
Yep.
somewhere.
Yeah. Well, it depends
Awesome.
on I think a lot of it has to depend on what you are trying to get out. So what I tell writers today is, if you think you want to write because you're going to make $1 million or you're going to sell 10,000 copies, then don't do it. I said,
Mhm.
I don't know anybody who's ever in the business that started with that goal in mind. I said, you have to write because you love to write, or because you want to share stories with people, or because
Love of writing.
you have stories inside you that just have to get out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the rest of the stuff may come, may not come. That can't be your goal. Your goal has to be, well, how in the world do I make this? How do I get this on paper? How do I do that? If
Yeah.
that's your goal, then you will eventually be happy,
Yeah.
regardless of your level of success.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's wise words for potential authors out there and everything. So let's get into a little bit about paranormal and everything like that. I know you
Okay.
typically are not writing paranormal stories in a sense when you run into some haunted mysteries and stuff like that. But the first question I always like to hit, I've asked this to previous authors, would you call yourself a believer or a skeptic when it comes to the paranormal?
Well, again, I think it depends on how broadly you're going to use that term. So clearly within the limits that I am encountering. So, and I talk when I give a presentation, things still go up in the night. The presentation is a not tongue-in-cheek presentation about the role that ghosts have in our culture.
Mhm.
I start off the presentation by saying this is not about a Halloween prank or what kids titter about. I said, this is something that's a very integral part, whether you recognize it or not, of our culture. And I kind of
Yeah.
spring from there. So having said that, my answer would be, if we are in that realm, then I am solely, then I started as a skeptic, but I am solely in the area of believer.
Mhm. That is something, again, we all share and especially with me and my other yeah, and with my other guests, we kind of talk about that too, like you're a believer, skeptic, and kind of a little bit of both, you know?
Right. I will. I tell this story. This is a true story of how I actually. So let me kind of explain how I went from. So my first book,
Yeah.
which you mentioned in the intro, "Leave No Child Behind," is a thriller about terrorist takeover of a high school in Ohio, and it's a very different kind of book than than my trilogy, the three books that we're talking about here, the Haunted Shore Mysteries. And I will be very honest with your listeners. I did not begin the intent to write those books as a paranormal mystery.
Okay.
Uh, I was working on kind of an idea for what I thought I might want to do as a mystery. And I was actually at a writing conference. The conference is called Midwest Writers Workshop. It's located in Indiana. Anyway, and I was supposed to go to a session. And John, as often happens in these writing conferences, somebody didn't show up. Well, I'm sitting there going, okay, what session am I going to go? Because I paid a couple $100 to go to the session. I'm trying to get as much out of it as I can. Well, for thankfully, there was a session on there by a presentation by a ghost hunting group, a paranormal investigating group. It's actually, the group is called Central Indiana Paranormal Investigators. And they did a presentation about a haunting, about a space that they were investigating that was supposed to be haunted. And I don't mean, this is now probably 8 years ago, probably. So I'm not sure that I'm giving all of the details accurately, but one of the things I remember is that they played a video. So and here's the short version. They were called to investigate this space, this room in this building that was supposed to be haunted. Small room, well, small meeting room, probably 20 by 40, maybe something like that. And they did what investigators normally do. They brought all this equipment and stuff. And they're showing us, they went through the process, told us the process they went through, told us who was involved, told us the time frame, all that kind of stuff. Then they played an audio file that they said that they had recorded. And it was the audio, and it was a recording of an anguished female voice crying for help and stuff. And I'm going, well, okay, you could fake that.
Right.
Well, then they showed something that just absolutely blew me away. So I'm sure you've talked about this on this podcast, but they use one of the things that I've learned that most reputable investigators now use is they bring in a thermometer. The one that they use is a just an old-fashioned circular thermometer, with the needle that goes around like that.
Right. Yeah.
And so that there is no human error. So nobody is sitting there recording it, and that may be correct or not correct. They actually take a separate video camera and they run the video camera for all 3 hours of the investigation. Just straight
wow. Yeah.
on this thermometer. Well, and then they showed us this. We're going to show you this. So I don't remember the details, but the room was like, it was vacant. The room was like 60 degrees, something like that. 62 degrees.
Yeah.
Now keep watching. In 10 seconds, the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. You saw this needle just go, and it stayed down. It stayed down for about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, maybe, went back up. Then they fast forwarded. This actually occurred 3 different times. They explained that they believe that is the presence of the ghost entering and leaving the space that they were investigating. This really got me thinking. So from there, I started doing a lot of research. I found out that phenomenon is, in fact, the most common evidence of ghostly presence that's been documented thousands of times all over the world, none of which is there a scientific explanation as to how a temperature in a room can go from 62 to 42 in 10 seconds and stay there and then come back up. So that put me down on the road to going, wow. All right. So what if I had this mystery that I was going to write about school, the first one called Blood on the Chesapeake, and I made it a paranormal mystery. So that's that's my story of how I got started.
Wow, that's really interesting because again, that's something that a lot of my paranormal investigators who I bring on the podcast, that's what they'll see too, and they'll see quite a temperature drop, and obviously they have some other equipment that they're using, but that's a great story. I love that. That's a great introduction into the paranormal. But let me ask you this, Randy, have you ever had a personal story which kind of made you too think like, something's going on here with the paranormal?
I have to be honest with you and say that at least prior to my starting the research and investigations, I really had not. There wasn't something that like some of your guests have shared before. I've never lived in a haunted house. In fact, my wife has never lived in a building that was ever occupied before we had it new. So we've been in 7 different spaces, apartments and houses. All of them have been brand new. So not exactly a place for a ghost to live when to begin with. So
well, you never know.
I know, but since I've been doing this, I've done some ghost tours and stuff, and I had a very memorable experience on one ghost tour in Nashville where I was.
Oh, right.
I don't know.
Yeah, would love to hear that. Would love to hear that one.
I don't know if it's fortunate or not, but it was the only time that I was able to observe an orb. So I'm sure you talked about this several times on your show, but for everybody else, an orb is what appears to be, at least to the human eye, a 3-dimensional ball of light that moves within a confined space with no explanation as to why it is moving. And I saw one of those, in one of the haunted spaces. It wasn't a house. It was a
Okay.
business. I don't know if it was a business or an apartment. I don't remember now.
Yeah.
On the haunted Nashville tour. So that's
Yeah.
that's not much compared to what others have shared with you, I'm sure, but that's
Well,
my story, and I'm sticking to it.
well, that's really interesting too, because in the South, I've been on a number of ghost tours and everything like that too. And one of the things is I always tell people, like, I've been in Savannah, Georgia, which I highly recommend. If you're just looking to get somewhere where it's everything is literally haunted in Savannah, it's the most haunted city in America. I've said this several times, but I don't want me to bore my audience, but because they've heard it several times. Like, literally, you go in there and it's like, yep, that's building's haunted, that's haunting, my apartment's haunted, my the Sonic drive-in is haunted. It's just crazy how many different places and how they view it here. But also the Midwest is haunted. Several locations are haunted here. So yeah,
Yeah,
so go ahead.
I was at Savannah and actually did the Savannah Ghost Tour.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that Savannah and Cape May argue as to which one is the most haunted seaport on the Eastern Shore.
Right.
That's
Right.
a fun war going on between the two of them. So.
Yeah, right. So tell me through when you do research on books, Randy, tell me about some things you've gone through and maybe found out some really interesting facts or some haunted history. Why don't you share that with our audience?
Well, yeah, one of the things that I try to do um, very meticulously in my books is make sure that they are as authentic as possible to both the time, the place, the events, the possibilities. One of the things that I don't like, that I uh, lampoon about
Yeah.
ghost stories, other people. Well, let me rephrase that. Most other people's ghost stories are either one of two things. They are either what I call the Stephen King variety, okay, the terrifying, keep you up all night ghost stories,
Mhm.
or they are what I call Casper the Friendly Ghost stories. You know, the
Right.
in a cozy. My grandmother had the yarn shop and she died, and she comes back and helps me solve mystery. You know,
Right.
what I learned, John, is that both of those are could not be much further from the actual reality that I've
Mhm.
been able to research. So what I found is that the incidence of malevolent ghosts are so small as to be ridiculous.
Right.
So, but one of the things that's very different about my books, nobody is going to be terrified all night staying up reading my books. Well, with the exception of the one about the terrorist cell taking over the school, that's pretty scary. But
Yeah.
the paranormal mystery books they've been described as eerie, but they're not terrifying, because what I do is everything that I have the ghost do fictionally in my fictional story has all been documented, that we have evidence of ghost interaction with human beings doing this. So they don't solve the mystery, they don't tell them who the bad guy is. None of those things happen. They only do the things that ghosts have been documented having done. That's one of the differences with my books.
Mhm. Okay.
Uh, and it's, again, because I'm trying to keep it as accurate and as close to reality as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great because, again, I had one of my guests on and she is a practicing witch. Okay. She's a good witch. So don't worry about it, Randy. She's not going to curse you.
Okay.
But anyway, she was on there and she was like, look, she does believe and practice with some demons. Lilith is being one of them, but she's using that for her power and not for bad power, but to help people and to understand and be empowered as a woman. And it was so interesting because she's not like in her basement covered in blood and scaring people. You see what I'm saying? She's
Yeah.
she's there to help people. She's there to learn. She's there to share it. She's there to, do everything to make sure people stop getting the Hollywood movie out of their
Right.
head, or books of people, you know what I mean? Like you're talking about, leave you up all night, with the lights on.
Here's this is something that might be interesting to your listeners, John. And one of the things, one aspects of my research is I researched religions. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but if you are a member of any faith community anywhere in the world, then part of that dogma of that faith community is a belief in ghosts. So it doesn't make any difference if you're raised Buddhist, if you're raised Jewish or Muslim or Christian. Every religion has at its roots some belief in ghosts. Now the beliefs in ghosts are not the same from religion to religion, but every religion has a belief in ghosts. And one of the things that I found that was most interesting is that in the Buddhist religion and in the Eastern countries, they have a belief and a response to ghosts that are almost the opposite of what we do in the Western country. So, as you mentioned, I have 2 presentations about ghosts that I have shared with over 100 audiences all over the country. The one is called "Things Still Go Bump in the Night," and the other one is "A Few Favorite Haunts." In fact, I'm sharing both of those, one tomorrow with one group and one Tuesday with another group. And about every 4th time that I share those, when I'm done, somebody in the audience will come up to me and go, "Can I tell you about this experience I had with this ghost?" Sure, go ahead. So they'll proceed to tell me about their mother's in-law's haunted house that they inherited, or staying in a hotel where they were in. But my point, John, is that almost always their response to having to encounter a ghost is one of fear. It's a Western response. If you mention ghosts, somebody the most typical response will be retreat and fear. For Buddhists, they have exactly the opposite response. So they believe that ghosts are I've never been able to get a translation that's very good, but they call them suffering spirits. And they believe that they should be pitied, and we should have compassion for ghosts instead of running away and being scared by them. I think that's a very interesting contrast. And now I blame Stephen King for a lot of that. And
so do I.
There were plenty of scary ghost stories before Stephen King came along, but he kind of made it Hollywood version. But I thought, that's an interesting aspect I've learned from our research that most people don't know. So it kind of, and I can't imagine that in China or India where they practice Buddhism, I can't imagine that ghosts are much different than what they are here, but they have a very different reaction to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that leads me to my next point. Have you ever had a skeptic come up and say, "Oh, ghosts aren't real, Randy. What is this? Come on. That your presentation was a bunch of BS."
Every time. No, not every time, but often. Yes, often. In fact, here's how I counter that, John. So about halfway into the presentation, I have a set of slides that I'll go, every time I do this presentation, I have somebody giving me this. Now you can't see me, but I give them the crossed arms and the doubting face, and that of course draws a bunch of laughs. And I go, for them and for everybody else, I'm going to share with you the scores of famous, intelligent, educated, sophisticated people, all who believe in ghosts. And I just blow them away with examples of scientists and politicians and musicians and athletes, all that they all know and they all recognize, but they didn't know they believed in ghosts. They were really, everything from Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan to Dale Earnhardt Jr. and you name it. And that kind of quells a lot of the, it's just a bunch of poppycock. I will still have some come up and do that. But
Sure.
after I give that little piece and show them the examples, I'm going, well, these people, my answer is, are all these people crazy? Is
Right.
Abraham Lincoln, because he believed in go, Ronald Reagan, is he crazy? And
Yeah.
Winston Churchill, and, so that kind of stifles it before it gets very far. But yes, of course, I've shared this with thousands of people, so I get every kind of reaction you can think of.
Yeah. And that's really interesting to me too, because we have a hotel here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is the visiting baseball for the Milwaukee Brewers, is the visiting, for the visitors. The baseball team comes up, and they anyway, people every year will say, "Nope, I'm not staying." Big athletes, these guys are like the prime of their lives, and they're like, "Nope, nope, not doing it, not staying." And there's been numerous stories where the players who have stayed there have had their clothes moved, have had experiences, and they admit it. They're like, "Oh, it's haunted. It's totally haunted.
Yep.
You're not going to convince me otherwise." And they'll ask to stay at another hotel, and some are brave and they'll stay there too. So you're right. There's a number of people who do believe in it, and the people who don't believe, I think is a good thing, right, for us, because you want that open conversation. You want to be able to have that, conversation where it's, oh, I believe in everything. Kind of, no, let's stand back here. Let's take a look at this and more educated.
And I tell them, you don't really have to believe in ghosts to enjoy my books anyway. It may change your mind when you get there because the ghosts are portrayed in such a realistic manner. I said, but if you don't, you'll still have fun reading them. That's okay. Not a problem.
Absolutely. Entertainment. So I always ask all my investigators this, and my authors, and all my guests, really, if tomorrow someone would hand you a definitive picture of what they believe is a ghost, and they have made this picture, doesn't matter what's an iPhone, doesn't really matter where they got the picture, right? But they've gone to scientists, they've gone to, whoever to check on this picture, and everyone has come back and said, this is real. This is definitive proof ghosts exist. What do you think would happen? How do you think people would handle that?
Well, let me explain that by giving you a little piece of what I do in my presentation. So one of the things, I actually go to that exact point in the presentation. I pose the question that people would have in their head, saying, because I'm telling them ghosts are, whether you want to admit it or not, they're very much a part of our culture.
Yeah.
They are there, and I show them all these aspects from religion stuff, how they're religion to TV to all that. And I say, people always say, well, if it's so evident, if it's so prevalent, how come we don't have any real evidence of that? My answer is one word: Photoshop. I said, you can today create anything that looks so authentic. And I said, and that's before AI. I shudder to think what AI can do. Oh. So I share with them about a half a dozen documented photographs that are all pre-digital. That I tell them, and I already checked this up before I bring them, that every one of the photos have been researched by photo experts to say they are a legitimate photo. They are not a double exposure. There's nothing been done to the photo. And each of the photos shows an actual real ghost. The photos are from 1890 something until about early 1990s, which is the last, about where the end of the pre-digital stage becomes. After that, it starts becoming digital. I have a ghost in a graveyard. I have a ghost in a haunted mansion in England. I have a ghost of a rich man who had died in England, and somebody at a airfield. So, I mean, and I will tell you, I'm always, of course, watching as I'm showing them. And it's an interesting, if you're looking at their responses, it's an interesting reaction that they're giving when they're going through the photos. So
Yeah.
are they convinced? Well, I don't think the person who doesn't want to believe that that's a possibility, I don't know there's anything that you could give them that would convince them.
Right.
It's kind of like you deal with the political partisanship that's in now. If somebody's on one side way far over, there probably isn't anything that you're going to be able to show them that's going to make them move out of that corner. So it's kind of that same way. That doesn't deter me at all. My goal isn't to, I'm not out there to convince anyone. I'm sharing information that they may or may not take. And I'm telling them why I think it's a good premise on which I can build a good story. That's kind of what, they don't have to believe what I believe. I give presentations to everybody that have different kinds of religious backgrounds. That's okay. It doesn't matter to me.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things I think it would affect a lot of people, religions, politics, and so on down the line, right? If you could say, here it is, here's definitive proof, all the people out there who were showing us that there is ghost out there, now we have it. And I don't know if it'd be a good thing or a bad thing, but I think it'd be interesting to see what would happen.
It would, I think. But again, given the state that we are in, nobody's ever going to believe that because now, who knows what AI could create? Jeez, Pete, I have no idea. But I know people who are skilled enough in Photoshop, they could create anything,
Absolutely.
So my conversation is more about, well, all of these people who you might respect, they didn't think that was incompatible to believe with ghosts and to hold these beliefs. You decide for yourself. But is Ronald Reagan crazy because he believed in ghosts? Really?
Yeah. Can you remember, Randy, a story that someone came to you that was a really good story, dealing with ghosts? Can you recall any where people come in after your session?
Yeah, the one guy that came up to me that was very interesting, and I did not know about this beforehand, but he had come to me, and I wish I could tell you the name of the hotel, but I can't. But he was in sales of some kind. I didn't ask. It wasn't that much. That wasn't important. But he did a lot of traveling as a result of the sales, and he ended up in a particular room in a hotel in the Dakotas. I think it was South Dakota, but I can't really be sure that one or the other. And he told me, he gave me the name of the town, the name of the hotel. He even knew the name of the room.
Yeah.
And he said that halfway through the night, he started feeling a presence. He actually saw a presence. And he was so rattled. I think feared would be probably correct. He was probably fearful.
Okay.
He was so rattled, he literally went down to the desk and demanded a different room in the hotel and got a different room.
Yeah.
And then later, afterwards, when he asked around the next morning, he found out that, yes, it was well known that room, I'm making a room number up. I don't remember it.
Sure.
305.
Yeah. Right.
There was murder there and it is haunted, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then after he told me that, I went home and looked up the hotel, and which he did as well. So, he did his due diligence and went,
right.
Oh, what the heck is going on here? And then he found out that this hotel did have this reputation of being actually haunted. So it was an interesting way, and he just came up to me afterwards and said, I believe. I didn't used to believe, but I believe now.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, like you said, it's a great story too, even though he was scared, you go through it's still a great story to tell around, the campfire or to your friends and family. And, that's what it makes paranormal so interesting, the mystery, behind it and see where it is.
That. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So what would you say, just off the top of your head, when you're doing your presentation, when you start your presentation, what would you say the percentage of people who believe in ghosts versus when after you're done with your presentation, the percentage of people now who believe in ghosts? Do you have a percentage on that one?
No, I don't. I think I probably move some, but I've done the research. So the research says, I don't know if you know this or not, but they've actually done um, of two studies of Americans asking that essential question: do you believe in ghosts? One was done by Harris, the people who do polling, and that was done in 2003, so the last 20 years. And another one was done by Huffington Post much later, 2017, and
Mhm.
both of the surveys had exactly the same or virtually the same results. One had 48% that believe in ghosts, the other one had 51%. So essentially, 1 in 2 Americans in both surveys
Yeah.
said that they believe in ghosts. I shared this as part of that this is a pervasive part of our culture. It's not a fringe thing. And
Yeah.
and then, so that's kind of how I set up my presentation talking about ghosts.
Yeah.
Then I don't know if you're aware of this. So they've also done two other groups have done 2 additional studies asking for people who have had encounters with ghosts. Do you know about that?
No, I don't know about that. I'd love to hear.
In 2007, the AP IPOS, IPOS, uh, that's another line of AP that does surveying. They did a study, and then in 2006, Baylor University uh, did a study, and in both cases, they had again almost exactly the same results. About 1 in 5. One was 23%, the other was 20%. So 1 in 5 Americans believe that they have had an actual encounter with a ghost.
Hmm.
I think that's an interesting way of starting the
Yeah.
conversation. Saying,
Yeah.
these people really think that they had some kind of encounter with somebody from the spirit world. I don't think that should be discounted just because it's not in your experiential realm.
Yeah. Right.
So the answer you're asking me, am I able to move some of those people? I have had some people come up to me afterwards, but I can't quantitative. This is all,
Yeah.
uh, just individuals, and they will say to me, I wasn't really sure, but you make a pretty good case, or words kind of to that effect. Most of my presentations are to groups that are headed off to lunch, so I don't have lots of
Sure.
after after program conversations, but I've had more than a few of that nature. Them just saying, "Hey, I just want you to know you make a pretty good case. It's pretty interesting," and they always say they really love the presentation that I give. So that even if they don't buy any books, they're always really
Sure.
really interesting.
Sure. And that's great, right? So
Right.
you just have a little bit of interaction, a little bit of that's all you really need, for
Yep.
people to, they're listening at least. Right. They're not falling asleep in the back there.
Yep.
So let me ask you this too. Have you ever been doing research and all of a sudden feel like, I don't know, like something strange happened, like
There's a presence there.
whatever that might be, whether you
No,
visit a location or whatever.
no, I can't say that that's ever happened. Now I have not been. All of my research is from someone else. I mean,
Okay.
yes, I've gone on ghost tours. Yes, but like I'm not a member of a ghost hunting organization. I've learned from those people, but I'm not. I don't have personal experiences doing that. So the answer to the answer to your question, no, I've never been like writing and going, oh, maybe
Yeah. Right?
somebody here telling no, and I'm very much aware that what I am doing is fiction.
Sure.
I wanted I want it to be believable. I want it to be
Yeah.
credible,
Right.
but not to be confused with the real thing. Now, I will tell you this: I often cheat in this sense. So remember, I said that um, the location for my second book, which is Cape May, Crimson and Cape May,
Yeah.
the people in Cape May, they claim that they have the most haunted seaport on the Eastern Shore.
Sure.
And when I
Right.
was away, they like to argue with, in a friendly way, kind of
Right.
argue with that. Okay. So one of the things when I decided to set my story in Cape May, um, what I did in that story is mixed in with the fictional ghosts that I created are 2 or 3 of the actual documented ghosts in that town. So if you
Mhm.
go to that town and you learn and you go on ghost tours or you talk to the merchants and stuff, you'll learn about a couple of these ghosts. And I decided to take the legends that surround those ghosts and use them as placemakers for the fictional ghost in my story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
That
is
and speaking of that, a lot of authors kind of put themselves in a character, because it's like write what you know.
yeah.
You have a character, Randy, that's kind of like you in one of your books.
I There are elements of me in a couple of the characters in the Haunted Shore Mystery series. The characters are the hero is a social studies teacher. I was never been a social studies teacher. I was English originally before I was administrator.
Yeah.
But there's elements of Daryl that has a few things that are like me. In my newest book, Cruel Lessons, which was released this fall, which
Uh-huh.
is not paranormal, it's an amateur sleuth mystery. The character in there, Ken, the hero in there, is an administrator, a little bit like me, although would have been many years ago, but he has some of my characteristics in there. But in most cases, when I'm creating a protagonist, I'm trying to create a protagonist that has some real issues in addition to being the hero. And those issues are not mine. So, for example, Daryl has some serious OCD problems,
Mm.
OCD issues, I should say, has some serious OCD issues, which in the arc of the story are actually a reaction to problem that he had as a child with a ghost appearance and stuff. So, and I don't have that. I don't want.
Okay.
So the answer to your question is yes. Some of them have some of what I would call some of Randy Overbeck's personality. Maybe that's a better way to
Mhm.
put it. Uh,
Yeah.
but they're not me.
Okay. So when I order your books here, which I'm going to do and read it, go, I don't know, that's kind of a little bit like Randy.
Well, you'll probably hear. Well, I will say this. They often say things that I espouse. My books will talk. My books, first and foremost, are always fun reads. They're always whodunits.
Mhm.
That kind of hopefully a decent page turner. But at the same time, I'm talking about teachers as heroes. I'm talking about
Mm.
uh, going the extra mile for kids. That's what my heroes in the story do, and
Yeah.
that's what I talked about as an educator all my career. So
Yeah.
yeah, there are lots of those pieces of me that are in those stories.
Yeah. Well, so as we wrap up here, I have to ask you two quick questions. One, do you have I guess I'll say bucket list of a paranormal location you would like to go visit just to kind of see, whether it be the White House, whether it be whatever, maybe you've already visited that, that you're kind of on your bucket list. You're like, I've heard a lot of stories about this. I kind of want to take a look at it.
That's a really interesting question. The short version of the answer is no, with this slight caveat.
Okay.
Generally, when I am going to places, like for example, where we have on our bucket list places that we are trying to go
Yeah.
to. So
Right.
um, we love the Eastern Shore, so we go to the Eastern Shore and over on the East Coast a lot. When I go there, I'm often looking for interesting haunted places that I can investigate when I'm there, as opposed to saying, "Well, I know of this particular hotel in this town that I want to go see." I just kind of,
Mhm.
"Oh, we're headed there. Let's go to." When we go up to visit my grandson, who is going to be in St. Paul, I'll do my research and go, "I wonder where I should go visit while we're there, or maybe we should go on the ghost tour and find out what's interesting, what places are interesting there." That I kind of approach it that way rather than the other way around, rather than going to a
Sure.
particular place
Yeah.
because of its paranormal reputation.
Yeah. So last question, then we'll wrap it up here. What is the story you haven't told yet that you're dying, well, I should say dying to tell, but really looking forward to tell? What do you got on the horizon, Brady?
Well, I just finished a new manuscript and sent it into the agents, but I won't talk about that because it's not the paranormal. Because
Okay.
the one I'm writing next is the paranormal. So
Okay.
I had originally decided to do 3 in the paranormal series, the Haunted Tour Mysteries, and I wanted to see kind of what readers' response was, of whether I wanted to keep doing more episodes or not.
Yeah.
I've been very pleased with the response. They've really been, as you mentioned, a couple of them made even best-selling status, so they've done pretty well. So I'm actually next month starting on the fourth entry in the Haunted Tour Mystery Series. What happened? So I won't spoil anything, but
Okay.
the mystery, the series hero is a teacher by the name of Daryl Henshaw, as I mentioned. He has a love interest that who does not see ghosts, but kind of believes Daryl anyway.
Mm.
She's a nurse called a beautiful nurse called Erin Cavaney. In the first book, they meet. In the second book, they fall in love. In the third book, they're actually on their honeymoon in Florida when he gets haunted by 2 children who had been murdered.
Oh.
2 young children, 2 toddlers that had been murdered.
Okay.
Well,
Wow.
not toddlers, 5 and 6-year-olds. So
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
So the fourth book is actually going to take place a few years later. It's going to take place on the east coast of Michigan, at a town called Saugatuck. I did my research on this already.
Nice.
It will involve Daryl. It will involve Daryl and Aaron will now have a son who also sees ghosts, a 5-year-old son, and the murder is going to involve a murdered Native American woman. So all of that is going to be developed starting next month. Maybe by this time next year, we'll see something coming to fruition.
Great.
So that's what's next on the agenda.
Love it. Love the something to look forward to. So again, Randy, thank you so much. I could talk to you for hours. You're a fascinating man with great stories. And maybe I could have you on the podcast again later sometime when you said more stories we could share. I'd love to have you on.
Well, listen, thanks so much for having me, John. I enjoyed being here. And I look forward to a revisit when that works out for both of us.
This time. So where can they find you? Where's the best place to buy your books and other things you might be looking for as a nice little Christmas present for someone?
Well, okay. Well, I think probably what I'd want to say is that if they're looking for a great Christmas present that has a little romance, that has mystery and a little woo-hoo involved, you might want to check out the third book in the series called Scarlet at Crystal River. It's actually a Christmas mystery. It happens during Christmas of 1999 and 2000. So they'll both get a little bit of the paranormal, but they'll also get a fun mystery. And they'll do it all within the Christmas tradition. So they'll probably like that. What I recommend, the easiest way to check out any of my books is simply go to my website. I've got that's www.authorrandyoverbeck.com. Couldn't be simpler. And all of my books are listed there. And I've got what's called a universal link, which means you just click on that link, and wherever you like to buy your books, whether that's Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kobo, wherever you want to get your books, Apple Books, there's a button that you can push, that you can hit, and it'll take you directly to whatever choice that you want. The books are available on print, ebook, and audio book as well. The new book, Cruel Lessons, is not available on audio. That's coming in about 3 months, but the other books are.
That sounds great, Randy. Again, get Randy's books. They're amazing. He's an amazing author. He's an amazing man with all the things he's helping with people with literacy. Also listen to his podcast to learn about authors and all the great facts behind him, the great history. My favorite author, by the way, I forgot to tell you, is Edgar Allan Poe, just because I just felt he was such a different person and written so many great stories. So that's
and by all means, check out my podcast on Edgar Allan Poe. You'll love it.
I will listen to that. It is on my checklist over the holiday season. So we wrap up every podcast, Randy, by saying, say hi to your ghost. So hello, ghost, because you never know, right?
You're welcome to my house whenever you want, Ghost.
And then we say, stay spooky. Thanks again, Randy. We'll talk hopefully soon.
See you, John. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Thanks again.
All right. Bye-bye.